My name is Jace Beeler. I serve as Chief Staff to Governor Burgum and very excited for this special Northern Plains Ethics Institute discussion with Mr. Ed O'Keefe. So obviously, if you're on the call today, you're interested in the topic, you maybe have heard a little bit about the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library and some of the work that has gone on. But just a brief history here. The project itself has been, in conversation in North Dakota for quite some time. It's been worked on by various individuals over the years. Governor Burgum started to really participate in the discussion around the library back in 2018 into 2019, leading into the legislative session. And he, really felt that this could be an opportunity to transform the tourism industry in North Dakota and to help lead if done right, help lead a national conversation around civics, around leadership, around conservation. In September of 2019, the project took a huge leap forward when Ed O'Keefe joined the team as the CEO of the Presidential Library. Really, since that point in time, it has just taken off. Ed has led an amazing team and has built an amazing team that has transformed the scope of the project and really is, it's got an opportunity to not only make an impact for the state of North Dakota, but for the region, the country, and even the globe. I know that you're going to hear a lot about Ed's ideas today on the vision for the Presidential Library, its role in all the topics that we discussed, and using Theodore Roosevelt to guide the future and help train new leaders across the globe. So before I turn it over to Ed, I just have to say, Ed comes from an amazing background of media. He was the executive producer for ABC Digital News, senior vice president for content development at CNN. Was an entrepreneurship fellow at Harvard, and luckily enough, we were able to bring him back home to North Dakota. So Ed is originally from Grand Forks, my hometown as well. We are both Red River Rough Riders, and something unique here. When I was a senior in high school, I took a class trip to ABC News in New York, and Ed O'Keefe was the one that gave us a rundown of everything that was happening. So we've got a long history, and as per North Dakota normal, it's a small world and there's always a connection. So with that, thrilled to have Ed on, and we'll turn it over to him to lead the discussion. And one quick announcement, Ed, before you jump in, just have to say, as Ed is talking, feel free to think of questions and throw them in the chat. So at the end, we can really open it up for a good dialogue.
Thank you, Jace. It was destined to be. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules. My gratitude to you, Jace, for the moderation, and to NDSU for hosting this discussion today. Also, thanks, of course, to the governor for his steadfast support of this incredible project. I'm going to go ahead and go through a brief presentation. It's about 20 minutes in length. And as Jay said, please fire away in the chat, give the questions that you'd like answered. I hope this is more of a conversation than a presentation. So please, any and all questions that you have, queue them up, and I will go through this material so we have some background for the discussion. And then I look forward to talking with you all. So we're going to begin a journey, an expedition into the personality that really defined the American century, Theodore Roosevelt. We are, of course, building a legacy from yesterday to create a new tomorrow. We'd like to say that we look to the past to understand the present and make a better future. Really, what is the point of having a presidential library 100 years after the president has left the earth? It's about learning from, and not just about, Theodore Roosevelt. We have these values at the TR Library to dare greatly, think boldly, live passionately, and care deeply. And the idea here is that we hope this institution will instill these values in all of our visitors, which we don't even really refer to as visitors. We think of them as participants getting in the arena, for the adventure and expedition of their own life. And what can they learn from the values of TR that they can apply not only to themselves, but to their communities, to their state, and to the nation and world writ large. Our three pillar principles are citizenship, leadership, and conservation. And each one of these is equally important, but I think conservation in particular takes on special significance because of the location where we are citing the library in Western North Dakota. And we'll get into that a bit more as we move through the presentation. So what is our timeline? We get this question quite a lot. We've had some amazing hallmarks in the project thus far. We've hired the Future of Storytelling as our executive storyteller, very unique position in the project. Local projects, our interpretive designer who are doing the interior of the museum. We had an architectural competition, which actually took place during the pandemic. There were 3 finalists in that competition: Studio Gang, Hennig Larsen, and the ultimately victorious firm of Snohanta, which you'll hear a bit more about today. We actually passed a federal law to have the right to acquire the 93 acres on which the library will be sited. The congressional delegation in North Dakota was instrumental in making that happen. That process will be complete in April of 2022. And we announced on October 27th, 2020, that we had raised over $100 million in binding commitments and unlocked the $50 million endowment from the state of North Dakota. Incidentally, that endowment does not include any tax dollars. I mean, we get this question a lot. Where are the funds for the endowment from the state? That's an endowment that's actually held by the land board and pooled with a larger investment of $8 billion in funds. So we get the proceeds of that investment at 4% over the trailing 3 years. So it's a really unique configuration in a public-private partnership where the state challenged a private institution to raise $100 million to unlock a sustaining and continuing endowment. Not incidentally, that endowment now stands at $58.2 million. So we hope it provides a model of a public-private partnership moving forward. We anticipate a groundbreaking in 2023, a soft opening of the library in the fall of 2025, and a grand opening on July 4th, 2026, which would be the 250th anniversary of America. And that we are doing intentionally in partnership with America 250. For those who experienced the bicentennial in 1976, it was a nationwide celebration where there were all kinds of activities coast to coast and in each state. We've got all kinds of exciting plans that we're working on to be the cornerstone of that really patriotic moment of celebration at the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So I mentioned Snohanta. Snohanta is a US and Norwegian-based architectural firm. They have offices across the United States, over 200 people in the office in New York. They've done some extraordinary projects: the National Opera and Ballet in Norway, the Wild Reindeer Pavilion in the Norwegian National Park System. The library in Alexandria, Egypt was one of the first projects that they had done, and they won that through an architectural competition. Here in the United States, they've done SF MoMA in San Francisco, the 9/11 Museum in New York, and they're working on this incredibly complex plan for the Ford Central Campus in Michigan. And this is just a selection of the many different projects that Snohanta is doing or has done. They've designed this beautifully graceful, elegant, with, not against nature proposal. The building, and we'll talk a bit more about it, actually frames Theodore Roosevelt's arguably greatest accomplishment, the national park system. We are alongside, of course, Theodore Roosevelt National Park, which is a 75,000 acre park and 3 discontiguous pieces that will be the only presidential library alongside a national park, the only national park alongside a presidential library. Opens up an incredible array of possibilities in programming. And we're working with THRO specifically, and I'll talk about that in a moment. This is a look at the library landscape from above. And I think what's important to see here is, as I mentioned, it's 93 acres. So it's more like a campus or a community gathering place. Snohanta, as they did in the Norwegian Opera and Ballet, is a master at creating a place for people to gather. You know, you can do one of 2 approaches to a project. You can design for a community, or you can design with a community. And we are very much designing with a community here. We've worked very closely with the residents in Medora, those in Billings County, of course, across the state of North Dakota, led in no small part by Governor Burgum and the legislature. And we want to create a place where you can come and walk and take a have a picnic, spend time with your family, transverse that roof that you saw. It's not just going to be a site for the library and museum itself. It's going to be an ecology of development where you can learn from the land. We are working with the Medora Grazing Association to have active and live grazing on this ecology around a loop on the landscape. So you would actually see the relationship between the land and the landscape and the incredible ranching history of Billings County in North Dakota. So this is an aerial view of the two main buildings. So you can see it's primarily on the westerly building, the museum itself and the interpretive experience, which we'll take a look at in more detail in a moment. On the more easterly building, you have an auditorium, the pre-function space, classroom and event space, the executive spaces, and all of the administrative offices. This is, of course, a pretty high level view. We're at 50% schematic design. That is two of the 5 phases of development we'll go through before groundbreaking in 2023. We are pursuing something that's known as the Living Building Challenge. It is an ambitious level of sustainability. We've got a bevy of consultants that are working with us to attain a new sustainability standard. It's beyond LEED. It's not really a certification as much as it is a living system, or how the building will actually relate to the landscape and the architecture and the living beings who are in and around it. And embrace nature and the surrounding landscape of the Badlands in the same way that that beautiful design and architecture is doing as well. The LBC, or the Living Building Challenge, has several different petals: place, water, beauty, energy, equity, materials, health, and happiness. So I thought this would be of particular interest today, because it's such a unique component to this project that we don't really and haven't really been able to talk about much. I mean, we think that there's such a powerful relationship between the land, the energy development in Billings County, and the idea that Theodore Roosevelt always had one foot in the present and one eye on the future. So can this building live in this place that has such an exceptional history of energy development, ranching, and tourism, and embrace this concept that can really show the highest level of sustainability? I mean, ranchers are the original conservationists. And it's remarkable to me that in Billings County and throughout Western North Dakota, you have some of the most vibrant land for carbon sequestration and carbon capture, second only to the oceans. Governor Burgum has stated that he would like North Dakota to become the first carbon neutral state by 2030. And that's really driven in large part through these partnerships with the carbon capture possibilities in Western North Dakota and some of the interesting regenerative agriculture experiments in Eastern North Dakota. So I think that the Living Building Challenge really finds its place in this incredibly rich history of the land and the people of North Dakota. So I mentioned Local Projects. Local Projects is our interpretive design firm. An interpretive design firm essentially builds the interior of the experience of the museum itself. They have done some amazing projects. They worked with Snohanta on the National September 11th Museum. They've done the Zero Museum in Bilbao, the Cleveland Museum of Art. They just opened Planet Word in Washington, D.C., a brand new museum and experience in Washington. Greenwood Rising has been a remarkable project on the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, and the London Mithraeum, just to name a few of their projects around the globe. So which brings me to another subject that I wanted to specifically talk about today. Museums should do hard things. I love this quote from Monique Renee Scott, the director of museum studies at Bryn Mawr College. She said, "Museums should not simplify stories. We should complicate them." So how do we take the legacy of Theodore Roosevelt, who had so many remarkably positive qualities, but of course lived at a different age and time than what we might expect today? We simply believe that we need to humanize, not lionize Theodore Roosevelt, that there's an exceptional way that we can take this historical figure, and as I said at the beginning, look to the past to understand the present and make a better future together. We're creating this presidential library in the 2020s, not the 1920s. If this presidential library already existed, it would have been frozen in time with the mores and traditions and expectations of the 1920s, right after Theodore Roosevelt died in 1919. Doing this project now really does enable us to embrace not only the glorified, wonderful parts of TR's legacy, but also the complicated ones, because museums should do hard things. We have an opportunity to tell the full story, to start a dialogue and have a conversation on the evolution of the United States. So that takes me back to the design itself. How does that really begin to express itself? You can see here in our first overview look at what the museum's interpretive experience will look like. You'll go into different epochs, different stages of TR's life, and you're a participant in the journey. You're learning not just about TR. There'll be equal parts of reflection and also experience. We'd like to say that we want this to be a museum where kids drag their parents. And that means that you'll do things, you'll take action. It will not be traditional with objects under glass at every turn. You can see in that narrative gallery spine, that whole central space in the middle, that'll probably be the most traditional museum space where you learn about the history of Theodore Roosevelt and each of the different moments in his life. In the galleries, they're more like immersive theater experiences. You'll go through a memory train that will take you through those traumatic events of the loss of his wife and mother on the same day in the same house, Valentine's Day, 1884, that brings him to the Badlands, and you'll actually look out onto the landscape of the Badlands and see what Theodore Roosevelt saw, that restorative and healing spirit, the resilience that gave him the courage to go on in his life and gave him the opportunity to live what he would later call the strenuous life. So that experience in the West, what did he learn from the values of the Dakotans, the ranchers, the people that he met and lived with in North Dakota? You know, how did that then propel him to the Rough Riders and the path to the presidency? How did this experience shape and change him? And what can you learn from that experience, not just the facts and figures of a great life? We have turned to a story council to help us tell that story. It's complicated, right? There's so much history to be worked through and talked through and thought through. So you can see here, we have a group of about a dozen historians, authors, experts in different parts of TR's legacy and life, helping us shape a couple of different aspects of the project. Number one, they guide the accurate historical record for the interpretive experience. Number two, they author research papers that will help inform each one of those galleries that you just saw. And they'll serve as, number three, experts and a sounding board on any and all issues related to TR's legacy. So, for instance, the Story Council was a part of the discussion around the Equestrian Statue, which you may have read about recently. And this is, I think, a great example of museums doing hard things, not shying away from the complicated subjects and legacies of historical figures. So we at the TR Library and as a board looked at this statue and said the composition presents a racial hierarchy. It is problematic in its actual composition. It's also problematic in the consent. It's on Central Park West, one of the busiest streets in all of New York, which puts it right up there with one of the busiest streets in all of the world. And you can't make a choice about whether you want to go into this museum or go into this gallery and confront this piece of art. There is also very little to no context. It's just out on the street and you don't know why it was created that way, when it was created that way, or for what purpose it was created that way. Now, we as TRPLF did not make the decision to remove it. The city of New York is actually the owner of the Equestrian Statue, and the American Museum of Natural History serves as the state's memorial to Theodore Roosevelt. So they made a conscious choice to make the front entrance of the American Museum of Natural History the memorial to the governor and president, who of course was born and lived and represented New York during his lifetime. So they made the decision to remove it, but it couldn't actually be removed without a destination to reconsider it. That is when TRPLF entered the conversation via the Roosevelt family. They asked us to have a conversation with AMNH and the City of New York about whether the appropriate place to reconsider and potentially recontextualize the statue is North Dakota, the future home of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. So there's going to be a couple of steps that happen next. We are going to form an advisory council, and that advisory council will be responsible for actually debating and discussing if and how the statue can be reconsidered. If the answer is indeed yes, then they will move on to how to recontextualize the statue, in what form and where. So that's going to be the next step of the advisory council. They will facilitate that removal and reconsideration to start a dialogue. It's the beginning, not an end of a long discussion. They'll have the opportunity to decide what, if anything, should be done with the statue once it is removed from New York. And the hope and plan is to engage in a discussion about that recontextualization. The result could be an incredibly powerful way to tell the whole story, but it has to be a decision that people really feel represents all sides of the story and something that you could feel powerful in coming to see and making a proper and appropriate decision about encountering. So a long way to come in that discussion, which takes me to the programming of the TR Library. So the programming is all those other things that we can do, not as a physical destination, but potentially as a platform for leadership, citizenship, and conservation. You can see here, we've got 5 different programming aspects, from education to the content studio, outdoor programs, convenings, and the digital historical archive. But I'm going to today talk just about our relationship with Theodore Roosevelt National Park. Because, as I said at the beginning, we are going to be the only presidential library alongside a national park. This presents incredibly unique opportunities. We want to rejuvenate Painted Canyon and use it to promote not only TRPL, but Medora and other North Dakota destinations. We want it to be in partnership with the park and the Department of Interior, a gateway to the Western park system. We want to bring at least 700,000 visitors a year to the park, and when they're here, to do all kinds of interesting programming with them. For instance, outdoor programming. Nature was the powerful force in TR's life. The fresh air helped him conquer his asthma as a boy, and North Dakota Badlands provided a place of healing. So we want that experience to really be translated to people who visit the library and the park. All kinds of programming opportunities, whether that's with conservation and the conservation values that Theodore Roosevelt so embraced and represents, or to use nature as a classroom and teach science, exploration, and conservation in the park, not just the museum, to provide access to nature to diverse peoples of all ages, young and urban areas, encouraging appreciation of the beauty and healing power of nature, and looking at preserving and protecting our planet and the natural resources of it. Again, no better place is there to have this discussion than North Dakota, where you've got this incredible agrarian history, as well as energy development, the ranching and ranchers as the original conservationists. We really think that this can be a powerful place to bring together all sorts of different points of view for discussion and education in the outdoors. We want to be the only presidential library that brings you in to get you out, right? Most museums, you exit through the gift shop. We want you to exit through your life, to get in the arena for whatever the cause it is that you want to fight for. And we think that the outdoors and our relationship with Theodore Roosevelt National Park is an incredibly unique way to do that. So again, nature is the classroom, conservation, photography safaris, Knowles outdoor leadership expeditions, nature walks. There's so many possibilities with the park. So I'll end, of course, with an inspirational quote from Theodore Roosevelt: "The best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing." We at the TRPLF are incredibly grateful for the opportunity to work hard at this work worth doing. We are honored to represent Theodore Roosevelt, to work with his family, to work with the governor, to work with the North Dakota legislature, our partners at the Theodore Roosevelt Medora Foundation and the Theodore Roosevelt National Park and the Department of Interior. We have so many different opportunities to create a connective tissue across the state of North Dakota. This library will not only impact Western North Dakota and Medora and Billings County, McKenzie County specifically, it will extend across the entire state to Fargo, to NDSU. I should say, not incidentally, that we're working with NDSU on some of the ecology and plant development, the landscape architecture of this enormously creative project. So it already is having an effect across the state and not just in this one particular location. But I'll just end today by saying that you were kind enough to give me your most valuable asset today, your time, but we also want you to be in the arena with us. We need your support. We want you to be a part of this project. We have a long way to go, both in terms of the fundraising as well as our programming and other development. So where you see an opportunity to get involved, we would invite you to get in the arena with us. And now I look forward to hearing from Jace and taking your questions.
Thank you, Ed. Terrific presentation, and really, really appreciate your passion and drive behind the project. I know that North Dakota is lucky to have you at the helm. So for those that have joined us throughout, again, please feel free to put any questions you have into the chat, and we will really open it up. The hope is that we can have an exchange back and forth, and keep the conversation flowing. So we do have our first question right off the bat here. The question is, did any ethical issues related to Indigenous people in North Dakota arise for the library, its site, or its design?
Yes. Well, thank you for that question. Absolutely. I am very pleased to say that we are going to be, and I am personally going to be engaged in a discussion with the chairman of the 5 tribal nations in January. We have been working with the governor's office and with Nathan Davis, the executive director of Indian Affairs, regarding the relationship with the 5 tribal nations, as well as all the tribes that are represented, not just in North Dakota, but those that were present in the state, or what would now be considered the state, and are outside the traditional borders now. So yes, this has been a very big issue for us. We have had conversations not only related to the site of the library, but of course the relationship with Theodore Roosevelt National Park. I think there's a couple of things. I mean, one, we see an opportunity for a dialogue and a discussion. Let's take the Equestrian Statue, for instance. I mean, that is a provocative place to start a dialogue, and its potential reconsideration and recontextualization can be an opportunity to actually show in word and deed what we have been saying we want to do, which is to have a discussion in which all sides feel like their perspective is represented. With regard to the land, yes, we have been hoping that we will start the land acquisition by hosting a healing circle on the site of the land itself. After which, by the way, would include members of the Roosevelt family. That would have to be done at the invitation of the tribe. So it's not a decision that TRPLF makes, it's a decision that the tribal nations would make, and would be at their invitation that we would participate in that healing circle. But we would very much like that to be the first event that we have on the land. We do intend to fly not only the US and state flag on the site of the library, but would also like to fly the flags of the 5 tribal nations on the site. Now, they will need to be moved for the construction and then reflown at the opening in 2025 or 2026, but we would do that ahead of the actual groundbreaking as well. And then there's some really interesting ideas with regard to programming. I mean, specifically, we've had discussions, for instance, with the only organization in the United States that has the federal right, they have a license for Fish and Game to redistribute federally protected feathers for sacred ceremonies. And we're in discussions about whether the site of the library could be a secondary location for that redistribution of federally protected feathers, non-eagle feathers for sacred ceremonies. So I think that there's, and then the programming with the park is a huge opportunity for Native American culture, Native American history, Indigenous history with regard to the land. But those are just a few examples of the discussion that have already taken place and will advance as we come.
Thank you, Ed. And so it sounds like, one of the goals to have conversations and tackle the challenging topics is already starting in your work, and look forward to hearing more about that in the future. So another question came in. You talked about the 93 acres, the Painted Canyon, Medora, kind of, the fact that it's not just a singular site. How will the library engage with sites outside of North Dakota, whether it be Sagamore Hill or TR Island in DC, and how will those be incorporated into the design?
Well, we've got a phenomenal relationship with the National Park System, and of course, included in that is Sagamore Hill, a National Historic Site, the home of Theodore Roosevelt, and in New York, the Boyhood Home, another National Historic Site. And primarily, that relationship has been about how we can complement these incredible sites that already exist and tell a full story of Theodore Roosevelt that isn't necessarily possible in those two extraordinary locations. I mean, you might have noticed that Sue Sarna, who is the curator at Sagamore Hill, is on our story council. We've got great relationships with Daniel Prebut, who's the director, not just of the site at the Boyhood Home, but all of the sites in New York. We want to, there's not a lot of interpretive space in those spaces. They are National Historic Sites. So in and of themselves, they're extraordinary to visit and give you a real sense of the life of TR. But we have had this really amazing discussion. Actually, Michael Cullinan, who's also on the Story Council, and he wrote the tremendous book, Theodore Roosevelt's Ghost. If you haven't read it, totally worth getting, all about how TR has been memorialized in various ways since his death in 1919. We're having a discussion with Michael and said, when you're in Sagamore or you're in the East, you feel a sense of Theodore Roosevelt's ghost. This is where he lived and this is where he died. When you're in the West, in the Badlands, you feel a sense of Theodore Roosevelt's spirit. This is the place where he encountered a people that were not like him, that were from a different class of life and were hardworking people who extolled the values that he wanted to live up to and had probably only lived in the life of his imagination and curiosity. This Dakota was his first opportunity to live the strenuous life and to prove to himself that he had the power and resilience to overcome a moment of incredible loss. And so I think that the totality of the picture of his life and the fact that you can't throw a stone in the United States without hitting something related to TR's legacy is something to be embraced. It should be an ecosystem that all speaks and supports one another, rather than say an isolated experience that has something here that they don't.
So next question that came in, more of a status question, asking about where we're at with the U.S. Forest Service land acquisition, and then where we're at with the fundraising for the project itself.
Sure. So we are in the process of acquisition. The land conveyance was passed and signed into law in December of 2020. And the process was initiated in January of 2021. And right now we are at the appraisal stage. So they're actually appraising the land, and they will then, once they have that appraisal, finalize the sale of the land. And Billings County just recently rezoned that land from agricultural to recreational. Everything that needs to have happened has, in essence, happened. The last and final step is the actual sale of the land, which is just part of a bureaucratic process that you have to go through these necessary steps to complete. Jace knows nothing about bureaucracy, so I'm sure this is a very foreign, but sometimes, Jace, in government, there are blocks and you gotta go through the steps to get to where you want to go. But I know it never happens in the state of North Dakota, but on the federal level, it happens sometimes. So as soon as we're through the last and final step, we anticipate that will be April. The land will be purchased. And as I mentioned, we hope that at that time, may not be April specifically, but right after the purchase of the land, we hope to host a healing circle or be hosted at a healing circle on the land itself. And the question around fundraising, we are still in the quiet phase of the campaign. I sometimes joke that it's the loudest quiet phase ever in the history of fundraising, because of course we had to make the announcement in October of 2020 that we had achieved the $100 million to unlock the $50 million endowment. So what I will say is that the building that you just saw, the beautifully designed landscape, architecture, and everything you saw inside of it will cost more than $100 million. So we are still in an active fundraising campaign, and we will put out, we will have a public phase of that campaign somewhere down the line.
Well, I appreciate that. And you'll have to tell me sometime more about that bureaucracy stuff. I don't know what that's like. We don't have that here in North Dakota.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So next question here. The library is designated for sustainability, or designed for sustainability, excuse me. What particular measures are you taking to help meet that goal? Yeah,
it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I mean, so Snohanta is a rare and unique architectural firm because they embrace both architecture and landscape architecture. So NDSU has a school of architecture and landscape architecture. We're actually working with NDSU on several of the ecological elements of the landscape that we're designing. Confluence is our local landscape architect of record. JLG is our architect of record, and J.E. Dunn is our construction manager. So I'm talking a lot today about some of the national elements of the project, but I want to be clear, for every national element, there is a local root, including in sustainability. So we're working with NDSU on the ecology, the plants, the seeds, and some of the experiments that we can potentially do in and around those 93 acres, really restoring that ecology to its natural habitat. And then I mentioned the relationship with the Medora Grazing Association. The idea there is to have 8 to 12 sort of designated areas of grazing. And the grazing will be intensive and move to imitate the pattern of bison migration. So what would have happened when the bison were naturally in that landscape. So if you can restore the ecology of this place to what it is naturally and really have it exist as again, nature as the classroom, a theater of ecology, you're showing sustainability in action. You're showing that the relationship between ranching and grazing and the land is symbiotic, not oppositional. You're showing, I think, by placing this center of sustainability in the state in which is the second largest energy producer behind only Texas, that there's a positive relationship between energy development and sustainability. These are not oppositional forces, right? Theodore Roosevelt's an interesting character through which you can have this discussion because he's a hunter conservationist. He's a Republican who runs as an independent. He's someone who is born in the East and has this formative experience in the West. I mean, conservation in Theodore Roosevelt's view involved both preservation and commerce. And think about where we're building this institution. You have a national park framed through the view of the corridor of Snohanta and JLG's beautiful building. But you also have active ranching and energy development. It is in some ways a contrast in terms, but it's not a contrast. That's the living ecosystem of our world and our people and all of the dependencies we all have on it. So, you know, the idea here is to pursue the Living Building Challenge, which has these incredible aspirations and goals. If we are able to achieve, or I should say, when we achieve the LBC, we would be one of the most sustainable museums in the world. We would undoubtedly be the most sustainable presidential library in existence. And we would be the only example of an LBC building in the upper Midwest. So there's a hope that the architecture, the design, this kind of unique relationship to the landscape and the library and the park will be a draw for people who might not have any interest in going to the museum and seeing the wonderful exhibit.
Well, and I would assume with all that work with NDSU landscaping, you'll find a way to, in the landscaping, have all the years they win a national football championship as well, right?
Well, that's going to be hard, right? Because there's all the work we have to do for the University of North Dakota on some of the westerly landscape. We'll see if we can put that in somewhere.
All right. Yeah, good. I'm glad we caught that. All right. So next question here. Well, it's late in the library. The space will be much different than is traditionally used for the purpose. What types of professionals will staff the TRPL? What kinds of consultants have been, or what kind of consultations have been done with architects and librarians?
Well, that's a great question. Well, I think again, this is a really unique opportunity for the library in ways. Say library, but it is not like a traditional presidential library. And the presidential library system was started under FDR for the purpose of actually preserving the president's archives, his papers. And even Barack Obama's archive is 95% digitally native. The presidential center that they're building in the south side of Chicago will not have the physical papers. It'll be a digitized archive, and there'll be another outpost for the papers themselves. So the evolution of what a presidential library is evolving and changing. And I think with it, there's opportunities here for the education system. I mean, at NDSU and the other 10 institutions across the state, really unique opportunities for, think about, let's take the landscape architecture program and the architecture program at NDSU. I can't really think of a better way to start with a program than to have an immersive study program at a Snohanta JLT design building with Confluence, J.D. Guns, landscape, and construction management as an example of a living technology for how you run landscape architecture. They're not opposed, right? Landscape architecture is architecture. I'm not a landscape architect, but the appreciation that I have for how people move and live and flow through space and what their relationship is to the ecology and land is so critically important to your enjoyment of spaces and places. And I think that's a great opportunity. But there will also be interpretive jobs. There will be obviously technology-related jobs. There will be the relationship that we have with Dickinson State University and the Theodore Roosevelt Center for the digitized archive that will live there. We have an academic institution 37 miles away that has this wonderful TRC, and how we can develop that relationship for interpretation, scholarly work, research. We have an aspiration to start the Theodore Roosevelt Scholars. So this will be the first next generation of conservationists, and they learn about ranching, agriculture, biology, geology. There's so many different fields of study that come off of this. And I would just finally say, the Theodore Library is a catalyst. We're not going to be the ones that do all this, right? We have a primary mission to build the library. In building the library, we believe that there will be economic opportunity all around the library. The Theodore Roosevelt Medora Foundation is the leading attraction in the state of North Dakota alongside the national park. They do wonderful entertainment and hospitality. They have fabulous programs that are already in existence in this place. Camping, RVs, motorcycles, getting experiences, and entrepreneurs investing in restaurants and lodging. There's all kinds of opportunities that start with the catalyst that is the library.
Well, and maybe, you talked quite a bit about the landscape there and how the land will interwork with the architecture. Just touch briefly on, I think the architect spent quite some time in Medora on the ground. Maybe share a little bit about the process you used and, how they interacted with the region and the community.
Yeah, I think what's been wonderful is this partnership between JLG, which is a North Dakota-based firm, and Snohanta. Snohanta came from all points and destinations. There's many people from the project who are from all over the nation and world, and they came to Medora in the midst of the pandemic, and they slept out in nature. They were in Sully Creek Park. They were in the Little Missouri, literally, and also the bar. They immersed themselves in the community and really tried to, I think, again, it goes back to that phrase, you can design for a community or you can design with a community. And we made the very intentional choice to design with the community. If, Craig Dykers, one of the co-founders of Snohanta, said very early on in the process that if we design this library and landscape for those who live within 15 or 150 miles of the location, it will be attractive to those who come from 15,000 miles away. So it has to reflect the life and legacy of the landscape and its people, or it won't work. I mean, you look at that Norwegian National Opera, that's a space that when it snows in Oslo, it becomes the #1 destination for sledding, right? Because of the design of the roof. That beautiful roof over which you can walk and look out at the 360-degree view of the national park and the surrounding lands, that loop that you can take and walk outside of the library, a mile long, going up and down different grades and elevations, framing different views, a spot for where you can sit and stargaze, another spot where you might be able to just rest and talk or have a picnic. I don't think that people will come to this not just to see the library, but they'll come to be in this place. It'll be a very special landscape and park for you to just gather and be with your friends in the community.
Well, it certainly sounds like that. And, North Dakota has one of the Guinness Book of World Records for making the most snow angels at one time. So it sounds like the roof of the library will be a perfect place to re-up that record.
Goal. I did not know that. I have learned something new today. That might be the only thing people take away from this entire hour, is that we hold that record.
We'll add that to the list. All right, so next question here. Water was one of the petals of the Living Building Challenge. A water feature seems like it may be missing on the site, or landscape features. Is there a water feature being considered as part of the design solution, or does the design solution connect to the water feature nearby?
Well, I love that question. I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, number one, what's interesting to me is Theodore Roosevelt always lived by water, and the water, he had his home in Oyster Bay, and it's remarkably, I've taken that walk from Sagamore and Old Orchard down through the wooded forest, and at times I think, am I taking a walk toward the Little Missouri, or am I taking a walk toward the Long Island Sound? I can almost sit there and imagine both of those experiences being very profound in his relationship to water. He was, of course, Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and he wrote the naval history of the War of 1812, which is still used in its nautical and military acumen to this day at the War College and in the Navy. I mean, he's revered as a veteran and a military figure, which is a whole nother aspect of this conversation that we can have. But as it relates water, I love thinking about how he would have had to follow the Little Missouri by moonlight in order to get from Medora to the Elkhorn, or the Elkhorn back to Medora, or down to the Maltese Cross. So there needs to be a relationship with water in the design in some way, whether that is a framed view or an understanding of the importance and critical nature of water. It's tricky because that particular petal does require building to be zero water, which will be very difficult in this. How could you not tap into the centralized system? Something we're working through and might not be able to accomplish. But even if we're not able to accomplish it, that will be something that can be a point of discussion. Why weren't we able to accomplish it? And what were the particular geographic challenges, and what might be able to exist in other landscapes and places? So that's a great question. I think it's a critical part of TR's life and history, and something that's so essential to exploration and discovery.
So next question here. obviously TR was president 1901, 1909. 110 years later, it's unique that a presidential library is being built, so far, removed from when the president was alive. So tell us a little bit about why this is relevant now, why the president is relevant now, and how you will work to showcase that.
Yeah, I think the reason it wasn't built had something to do with that bureaucracy, Jace. We have to look that word up afterward. But if we knew what it was, that was one of the reasons it hadn't been done to now.
That sounds like a research project for NDSU right there.
There you go. There you go. I mean, think about where TR was in 1901, the accidental president upon the assassination of William McKinley, who was assassinated by Leon Kolgish, an anarchist who was upset about losing his job due to what is essentially consolidation, right? And his place in the economic ladder. And when TR becomes president, Mark Hanna famously says, "Now that damned cowboy is president." Right? And Mark Hanna, not incidentally, Mark Hanna is the Jace Beeler of the 20th century. That's the shorthand. He had forewarned at the convention that it was apocalyptic to consider Theodore Roosevelt as vice president because it would put him a heartbeat away from the presidency. And Hanna's prophecy came true. He goes from a marginalized figure, 5 days presiding over the Senate, 6 months of basically no work, and he's president. And it's a self-determined presidency, right? There's no crisis upon which the president must act, right? He's the first president to specifically intervene in a labor strike. He convenes the governors of the nation for a conversation on conservation. That becomes the National Governors Association. That's the first time that happens. He intervenes in the violence of football, and that becomes the creation of the NCAA. He conserves 230 million acres of land. He creates the US Forest Service. He puts aside federal wild reserves. They're working with a pretty intransigent Congress, gets some major legislation passed, including the first food and pure drug acts that become the basis for the FDA and all the labor and food standards that we come to recognize as just standard part of life now. So I think that there's something really interesting in that he was a president at a time when there was hyper partisanship. There was an ecological conversation and challenge. There was a real tension between innovation and regulation and the kind of arc of what capitalism is and what regulation or innovation needs to be the rudder on that innovation and that progress or lack of progress, and an immigration wave that's changing the composition of the country and challenging people's notion of what it is to be an American or America. And then America's place in the world. What is it where are we? Should we have a large military? Should we intervene in other countries? All of these questions are still with us today, right? History doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And I think sometimes a historical figure is a good way to look at the past to say, where are we now and where do we want to go as a people, a country, and a world in the future? And so I think it's so unique. Theodore Roosevelt is uniquely popular. He's culturally relevant. He's a fascinating life, but his legacy is enshrined. We don't need to do this for him. The Roosevelt family is not knocking down our door saying, build a big institution to TR. They are saying, we would like to be a part of a bigger vision that takes the values that I talked about in the presentation, takes the pillars of leadership, citizenship, and conservation, and imbues them in the spirit with which TR lived, that you need to get in the arena, that you work hard at work worth doing, that you keep your eyes on the stars and your feet on the ground, that you have a strenuous life. I mean, the reason he's so relevant today is because he encountered the same issues that we are encountering with vigor, action, and thoughtfulness. And I think that that's always a lesson worth worth learning.
So what you could argue that it's not just relevant today, but almost needed, you know, at this point in time, based on the national dialogue in all these areas. So very helpful.
So I think in a place of civic convening, I mean, you know, I always love talking to people about North Dakota. I'm from North Dakota. I love North Dakota. And, you know, I say it's the middle of everywhere, right? You're right there where you can see the gateway to the West. You have an incredible, hardworking, values-driven society and people. You've got agrarian culture, but you've got amazing technology. You know, you've got companies like Aldevron, you know, you've got just an amazing mix of creativity and talent and good, decent, hardworking people that know, you know, you got to toe your end of the line, right? And that's what I think Theodore Roosevelt learned in North Dakota. I think he saw in the people and the work and the ranchers and the farmers and everybody that he saw there, what he wanted to be and what he thought America should be. And that's why he said, you know, I would never have been president without my time in North Dakota. It wasn't a political statement. I mean, he truly meant that the West, Dakota, his experiences, the values, the people that he met there changed his life. And had he not done that, even with all the advantages of his life in the East, he wouldn't have been president. He couldn't have accomplished what he accomplished without the experiences that he had there. That's why to that question about the network and constellation of Sagamore and the Boyhood Home and all the national parks, what a fabulous idea to have a presidential library alongside a national park that's really not about just bringing you there and enjoying this person's life. It's about thinking about your own life and your place in this great nation.
Absolutely. I think all North Dakotans can resonate with that and the connection to North Dakota and the impact it has. Okay, so another question here. With the Living Building Challenge in terms of sustainability, what were the thoughts of the local residents? What were their views on the climate change mitigation and, you know, you mentioned grazing and carbon sequestration. Is there a guiding ethical point or message that you want to convey with the library in that regard?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think, you know, this is again where we've had really productive conversations with the Medora Grazing Association, with the grazing associations in the area. You know, I joked with some of the ranchers, Theodore Roosevelt sure did know how to take advantage of his reputation as a rancher. So maybe it's time for ranchers to take advantage of the reputation of Theodore Roosevelt. You know, there seems to be this tension that both of these ideas can exist at the same time. You can't have a sustainable building in a ranching community. That's not at all the conversation we've had. I mean, the conversation we've encountered has been enormously positive because, again, ranchers are the original conservationists. They live off the land. I mean, just as a farmer lives off the land and the rain and the sunshine and the weather, right? And their ability to, with technology and their education at NDSU, be the best that they can at the business they do. The ranchers need the land. They love the land. They care for the land. And so, you know, this idea that somehow there is a tension, we've really just said head on, this is an opportunity to show that love for the land, to show the relationship between grazing and a healthy ecology, that if it's done responsibly, the way that you do it out west in Western North Dakota, it's actually a part of an ecosystem that's healthier and more vibrant. And that's from everything from the invasive species to the ecological management to, yes, the environment and climate. So I hope that it's a chance to use nature as a classroom, to bring people out and show, don't tell that story. And that's what we've encountered is when we have an honest, transparent purpose and dialogue, we've always found a receptive audience.
Well, thank you so much, Ed. I know that we're at the top of the hour here, so I just, you know, curious if there's any, you know, final comments that you have or things that you want to convey to the citizens of North Dakota and all who are interested in the project.
trlibrary.com. We would love to have you with us in the arena. Again, I want to thank NDSU. I want to thank you, Jace. It's always a pleasure working with you. You never are the bureaucracy in our, you are always our facilitator and biggest champion. We deeply appreciate the support of Governor Burgum and the way that he and the legislature got behind this project in 2019. I think without Leader Wardner and with several members of the legislature really putting themselves out there for the vision of what this could be, we wouldn't have the opportunity to be the home of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. And I, as a North Dakotan, am incredibly, incredibly blessed and grateful to be a part of this project. So I hope that each and every one of you out there with us will join us and get in the arena for the TR Library.
Well, thank you so much, Ed, for being on today. I know that we are all excited about this project, and North Dakota is very proud to have you at the helm, one of our very own. So, and a Red River Rough Rider. So I'm even more proud. So with that, we thank you all for participating today. To follow future talks with the Northern Plains Ethics Institute, please go on our Facebook page. You can find information there, and we look forward to future conversations and updates on the library.